Good evening, members of the public, councillors and staff, and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for Monday, the 20th of May 2024. I declare this meeting open at 7 p.m. I acknowledge the Noongar people of the Budja, which is the land that we gather on today. For thousands of years, their connection to country has provided knowledge, guidance, spirituality and life. We pay our respects to this ongoing connection, as well as their elders past, present and emerging. Remind all members of the gallery present that this evening's meeting is being audio recorded in accordance with council policy. If you're asking a public question or making a statement or deputation to the meeting, this will also be audio recorded. I remind all members of the public that no other visual or audio recordings of this meeting by any other means is allowed. That brings us to agenda item number 1, which is attendance and apologies. We have an apology from Mr. Fraser Sullivan, who's the Director of Corporate Services. That brings us to agenda item 1.1, which is leave of absence request for Councillor Jarrett. Is there a councillor who's happy to move a motion in regards to this item? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. And is that the officer's recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item number 2. 2.1 is a response to previous public questions taken on notice, and that's as per the agenda which will be circulated. That brings us to agenda item 2.2, which is public questions. Public question time will commence at 7:02 p.m. I ask Mrs. Michelle Rich to come forward and ask her question.
Thank you. My questions this evening are as follows. The Carnup Road culvert collapse caused months of severe disruption to the Serpentine and wider community. It is a documented fact that culvert pipes, the same or similar to the ones under Carnup Road before the collapse, are deteriorating much earlier than the assumed 100-year service of life that was expected when they were installed. My first question is, how many more zinc-coated corrugated metal culverts, pipes or similar are still in operational use in roads across the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale?
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Rich, and I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to provide a response.
Through you, Mr. President, thank you for the question, Mrs. Rich. The Shire's current asset data indicates that there are 7 corrugated metal culverts in the Shire's drainage network. These are located in Country Drive, Ballack Place, Pure Steel Lane, and Old Brickworks Road. However, the asset data will be validated through condition rating and asset inspections next financial year, if approved in the budget. This may update the asset data more accurately.
Thank you, Director. Mrs. Rich would like to ask your second question.
Has the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale started any detailed design works for the replacement of any of these zinc-coated corrugated metal culvert or similar pipes?
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Rich. Again, I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to provide a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Shire has not commenced any detailed design work for culvert replacement. Asset data validation will be occurring next year, which is required prior to the start of any detailed design works. The design for each of the culverts will be a case-specific individual design based on the particular site geology, road classification, traffic loading, road geometry and width, water flow volumes in the drain, creek, etc. Accordingly, an individual design can be prepared for each case linked to the estimated culvert renewal timeframes for construction to be informed by asset condition and funding availability.
Thank you for your response, Director. Mrs. Rich would like to ask your third question.
My third question is, what plan does the Council of Serpentine Jarrahdale have in place, including strategic planning, financial funding, workforce resourcing and community disruption minimalisation to replace all of these zinc-coated corrugated metal culverts or similar pipes?
Thank you for your third question, Mrs. Rich. Again, I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to provide a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your third question, Mrs. Rich. Following the asset data validation and accurate condition rating of the culverts, a culvert renewal forward works plan can be prepared, which would inform the culvert renewal timings with estimated costs in the order of priority. This plan will then be used for identifying or advocating funding sources and budgeting as part of the long-term financial plans.
Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Director, and thank you, Mrs. Rich, for your questions. There are no other questions that have been submitted to the Shire. I will invite anyone from the gallery to come forward and ask their question. If anyone is minded to come forward and ask a question, I would remind them of the code of conduct and will remind everyone to ask questions respectfully, and please do not cast aspersions or comments that are negative towards staff or councillors. Please come forward. Thank you, Mrs. Parkin.
Just done this quickly, so a question: why, as I believe, is the debrief for the Keysbrook fire not going ahead? I've got an email sent to me back in January, February, that there'd be a debrief in April, May. I commented at the time that that was too long from the event, which the fire was late December. So my question is why, and that was going to include with the Murray Shire coming to the debrief as well. Why has it been cancelled, or is it cancelled?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Parkin. There is a notice of motion on the agenda tonight that will go to some way to answer your question. If you want a further, if you want a further answer, I'm happy to take that question on notice. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public gallery? Mrs. Bond?
Posting $70,000 for someone's opinion of the entry statements to the Shire, and then further costs for production and erection. Is there any reason why the local children of the Shire shouldn't be asked to participate in this feedback?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Bond. Council did have a budget workshop last week, and that line item was discussed by council, and certainly the members of the public, the members of council that were present did not show support for that line item. The budget has not been adopted yet, but at this point it appears.
What's my idea either?
Thank you. Have you got another question, Mrs. Bond?
Why were perfectly good items put into a skip bin out the back of the council office during renovations? I still don't have that answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. We'll take that question on notice.
Why does council always want me to do their work for them when I ask legitimate questions at OCMs? It isn't that hard. But can I have an answer to that one at least?
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. That question will be taken on notice. Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Are there any other members of the public that would like to please come forward, Mrs. Rich?
Good evening, councillors. My first question: can the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale please provide the details of the SAT application DR 193/023-/23/0242545, which is the proposed educational establishment at 575 lot 218 Abernathy Road, Oakford?
Thank you for that question, Mrs. Rich. I'm not sure whether any of the directors managed to write down all those numbers, or whether, Mrs. Rich, you're prepared to provide that question in writing to staff. And
I have it in writing.
Thank you, and then they will provide. Thank you, and they'll provide an answer in due course. Thank you. You got another question, Mrs. Rich?
I do have.
Thank you.
Remembering that to gain the $18 million in Hypergrowth Road project funding from the 2021 state election commitment, the Shire had to jump through a number of hoops and prove that no other funding stream or mechanism existed for those roads. Please explain to me why the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale would think that it is wise to apply for state or federal government funding for $4.7 million for a road project when the funding stream is already in place for the road project through an approved development application?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Rich. Again, we'll take that question on notice and an answer will be provided. Do you have another question, Mrs. Rich?
I do,
Thank you.
Please explain to me in detail the information provided to councillors at the election advocacy policy concept forums and budget workshops surrounding the workforce resourcing that will be needed to deliver any election commitment funding, if gained, for the road advocacy upgrade plan.
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Rich. Again, we'll take that on notice and an answer will be provided in writing in due course.
Thank you.
Do you have another question, Mrs. Rich?
I do,
Thank you.
During the questions from councillors at the Q&A held on the 13th of May 2024 for this meeting's agenda briefing, it was stated by the Director of Corporate Service that councillors were given all outstanding CRMs to satisfy Councillor Bias's alternate motion for resolution OCM 022/02/24 from the 19th of February 2024 OCM. How are community members to know if their CRM has been dealt with fairly when this council will be making decisions behind closed doors as to what is in and what is out of the 2024-25 budget?
Thank you, Mrs. Rich, for the question. Again, the answer will be provided in due course.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Mrs. Rich?
I do.
Thank you.
Please explain to me what action has been taken, what discussions and the date of said discussions have been held with councillors, and what planning is currently being undertaken to solve and resolve the traffic issues being experienced within Jarrahdale Township since October 23rd, 2023.
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Rich. Again, that question will be taken on notice and answer will be provided in due course. Are there any other questions?
I do, thank you.
Thank you.
Does the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale routinely build or upgrade roads that hinder or stop access of emergency service vehicles?
Again, that question will be taken on notice, Mrs. Rich, and an answer will be provided. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your interest in local government. Is anyone else from the gallery who would like to come forward and ask a question? Thank you. That being the case, public question time is now concluded at 7:12 p.m. Public statement time will now commence at 7:12 p.m. and I ask Mr. Bill Denham to come forward and make his statement.
Evening, councillors and staff. My statement's regarding this gas gun thing in Jarrahdale. Here in our shire, we have our local land care selling cockatoos to help and encourage the endangered black cockatoo breeding. So on one hand, we've got land care trying to encourage the cockatoos to breed, and then the shire councillors are disallowing the gas guns, a method of scaring them off. The alternative for farmers is to shoot them. It doesn't make sense, especially as we're trying to have less guns in the community. I work in the Swan Valley behind Sandalford Winery during the week, a real tourist attraction, and gas guns are constantly going off in the grape season. You get used to them going off as it's a different sound. I suppose the local residents and surrounding businesses would rather the noise than farmers walking around with shotguns. Gas guns are environmentally the friendliest method of managing fruit and nut crop damage by birds, especially the black cockatoos. The alternative is the real deal shotguns and not be a favourable outcome for the birds, especially as they are endangered. Scaring with a gas gun versus eliminating with a shotgun results in very different outcomes, and I know which method should be supported, because otherwise we're going to have heaps of these little black and red feathers floating around Jarrahdale. Thanks, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Denham, for your statement. There has been no other written statements provided to the Shire. Is there another one?
Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. CO. There has been no other written statements received from the Shire, so I will extend the invitation to any members of the public to come forward and make a statement. Again, the precursor to that is I would ask all members of the public who decide to make a statement to be respectful to staff and to councillors. Is there anyone who'd like to make a statement? Thank you, Mr. Dunham.
Not so much a statement, but just a word of thanks to the Shire. As you know, 1C is netball regarding Kiernan Street, and they needed an updated strategic plan, and the netball didn't have one, and the council went out of their way to sort of try and help the association organise a strategic plan. I'm not allowed to mention names, am I, Paul? I don't know his position. He's to do with sport and rec. That's about all I know, but I hear that he's left and he was of great help. So thank you to the officers for assisting the netball.
Thank you, Mr. Damon. I would remind members of the public to refer to staff by their titles. I know it was nothing untoward meant there, Mr. Denham, but please, it's Mr. CEO. Are there any other councillors, any other members of the public who'd like to come forward and make a statement? Thank you. That being the case, I declare public. You're lucky, Mrs. Bond. You nearly. Please come forward, Mrs. Bond, and ask your statement or make your statement.
What reason is there to waste $3,000 on a breakfast to discuss the budget with residents and ratepayers? This is more for business than the ratepayer, and I'm sure there is no need to offer food to get people to. Constant lack of responsibility when answering the questions I put before OCMs has become monotonous. I'm not here to do the work for council staff, and I want a truthful answer. If it was just an exercise for me, I wouldn't bother because I do my homework, but I require an official answer. Don't have to tell council everything just so you can come up with answers others might accept, but I won't. I'm beginning to believe it would be better to remove all local governments because it appears MODAP make whatever decisions they want to appease their political followers. Use of postal voting for local government elections leaves no alternative to fair voting system. Both state and federal governments will not use postal voting because they know the fraud that would follow would be catastrophic. Why do some of you accept the disgraceful behaviour and then also want to manipulate the ward population for your own advantage? I have seen postal voting in all its filth, including a former councillor. And that is a long time ago, the former councillor. It's not recent, I can assure you.
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Bond. Are there any other members of the public like to come forward and make a statement? Thank you. That being the case, I declare public statement closed at 7:18 p.m. Moving to agenda item number 4, which is petitions and deputations. Agenda item 4.1 is a petition objecting proposed amendment to approved abattoir to allow increased production. It is a petition that Councillor Bias has received. Councillor Bias, are you happy to move the recommendation as per the agenda?
I am, Mr. President. I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Is anyone opposed? Thank you. That petition has been received and motion has been carried unanimously. That brings us to item 4.2, petition improving access to Serpentine town site for residents of Serpentine Lifestyle Village. Again, this is a petition that's been presented by Councillor Duggan. Councillor Duggan, are you happy to move the officer's recommendation?
Happy to move officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is anyone opposed? So that petition will be received and carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 4.3, which is petition by King Road Brewing Company requesting a lower speed limit on King Road. I am happy to present this petition and I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Is there a councillor who's happy to second? Thank you, Councillor Mazzini. Is there anyone opposed? Petition will be received and the motion carried unanimously. That brings us to deputations. The first deputation is from Mrs. Sandra Hawkins, SJ Lions Club, regarding item 10.4.4, 2024 Major Event Grant Scheme Round 2. I would ask Mrs. Hawkins to come forward and make her deputation.
This year is no exception in the fact that life goes on, is doing all the things that one has done over the years and will do in the future. Cost of living keeps rising, and so does the cost to run any event. I speak now on behalf of the Serpentine Jarrahdale Lions Club members, who you'll see today, who are supporting, who have run the Jarrahdale Log Shop and the SJ Lions Country Fair every year for over 30 years, the exception being when the COVID epidemic was at its worst. As in the past, the growth and popularity of the event does not only keeps increasing, but maintains the interest for not only the local residents, but those who come many miles to enjoy the event. There will be no change in our attention to detail for the business plan that has been submitted to Council for this year's approval. It is a 3-year plan showing our inclusion of many of the local volunteer groups in our Shire. It allows them to refurbish their coffers so that they in turn may also continue to assist the community. The groups that will be involved this year are the Serpentine Volunteer Fire Brigade, the Byford Boys and Girl Scouts, the Armadale Police Rangers, and the Food and Farm Fest Alliance, plus the Jarrahdale Community Collective Group. The event certainly promotes inclusion across the Shire and beyond. It most definitely encourages a healthy, active community engagement, together with giving priority to local providers who make up the stall holders and volunteer content. We are again pleased to say that the event will still be a free entry for all, as this is the one way that our Lions Club can help families to minimise the cost of their day out. This year, some of the content is different. However, we are sure that no one will be disappointed in what they will see. We believe that Log Chop and Country Fair is one of the largest and most popular events in our Shire. Our aim is for it to continue for many years. For this to happen, we rely on several sponsorships to fund the event, with the Shire being the primary contributor. The other sponsors are Lottery West, Bendigo Bank, Alcoa, Doral and Permacast, plus many other smaller contributors who provide the items for our raffle on the day. The SJ Lions Club cannot organise such an event without all the aforementioned organisations, sponsorships and assistance. The Lions Club have proven that they are able to organise and run an event of that size, that it has been delivered successfully, attracting 5,000 to 10,000 people every year. The Jarrahdale Log Shop and Country Fair is unique in its entirety. The logistics to manage it takes our Lions volunteers hundreds of man-hours to prepare, ensuring that September 29th, 2024 will be another memorable day for all. It is not just a day of preparation, but 3 days of intense activity and another day of cleaning up after the end. Just when you take a breath, all the acquittals must be completed and the planning starts again for the 2025 year. You will read the letters of support that our club receives at the Log Shop is the one event that everyone loves to attend. Patrons come back year after year with their children, and then those children bring their children year after year. The councillors, I respectfully ask that you grant the full sponsorship of $20,000 per year for the 3 years applicable to the application to ensure that this spectacular event will go ahead. In anticipation, I thank you for helping Serpentine Jarrahdale's Lions Club to help others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins, and I thank you for what you and the Lions Club does. I'd now like to ask Mr. Ross Waddell, Southdale Meats, regarding item 10.1.3, proposed amendment to condition of an approved abattoir to allow increased meat productions at Lot 5, 566 South Western Highway, Darling Downs, to come forward and make your deputation.
Well, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to come forward and show my support for the upgrade and improvements of my property known as Southdale. But firstly, my personal involvement with the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. For the past 30 years, I've been a ratepayer on 3 individual properties within the Shire. I'm the proud father of 6 daughters, 4 of whom have properties also within the Shire of Serpentine. I am the overseeing CEO of 4 businesses known as the Meat Machine at Maddington, West Coast Meats located in the Canning Vale markets, Statewide Livestock Services, and Southdale Pet Meats. We employ approximately 80 staff, currently with many of them living within the Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale. In about 1998, I was approached by the then Shire President, Jan Starr, and councillors to continue the running of the Mundijong markets after Wesfarmers chose to cease conducting the sales and selling the property to Serpentine Jarrahdale Shire. About 2013, I handed the operations of the Mundijong markets to MG Livestock due to my 50% purchase in the Great Eastern Abattoirs at Tamman, and for it to be necessary for me to attend livestock sales at Katanning every Wednesday. Great Eastern Abattoirs, ladies and gentlemen, is an accredited export abattoirs, with most of the product being air freighted to the United Arab Emirates daily. Now to move on to the matter at hand, being the reason we are here tonight. I purchased Southdale in July of 1993 after working for the previous owner and Shire resident, the late Vernon James Cockle, whom operated here for 20 years, giving me 50 years involvement with the current property and business. Southdale provide a necessary service to landowners, Shire rangers, vets, police, RSPCA, main roads, Murdoch University, Newshay Livestock Centre, and the Perth Zoo. Around 1995, with the help of Kim Valenti and Associates Legal Service, myself and Fainafil Farms, Poultry Farms, my next door neighbour, lodged a notification of moratorium for odour, dust and traffic management, and I am led to believe the WA Government Railways also lodged a notification of moratorium for noise over the proposed subdivision of the property known as Bruns Farms. On the 1st of August 2019, Council approved upgrade and improvements for my premises. Now 4.5 years on, and costs in excess of $300,000 to my family, and a further $500,000 already spent on fencing, new infrastructure, and brand new wastewater treatment system ready to go for this upgrade. This submission has all livestock housing inside housing, wastewater treatment procedures supported by the full approval of the Department of Primary Industries Regional Development and the Department of Water and Environment Regulation. And yet I find myself standing here with Shire members wishing to oppose this improvement. The words improvement and upgrade are something that councillors should take on board. But it has been our objective 4.5 years ago. Moving forward with a supported approval will see Southdale operations change drastically for the betterment of all. Abattoirs procedures will be conducted within enclosed buildings. All livestock will be held undercover areas. Waste products, which are today and have been always just about removed daily, and a brand new water system that will eliminate odour and allow us to reuse water and decrease our output onto the use onto the land. Nothing there will be zero output onto the land for 3 months of the year. Our property will be bound by numerous controlling government bodies that will see and entire works audits on a regular basis, ensuring all licence conditions are met. After review of opposing comments, there is a numerous comments relating to odour complaints. Since 1993, I have not received directly or indirectly a verbal or non-formal written odour complaint from the Shire or a resident of the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. I'd like to add also that my family's involvement in the meat industry in Western Australia goes further than 100 years. I can show you a photograph of my grandfather on a cutting cart, horse-drawn cutting cart in Claremont in 1920. That was carried on by my father, which I've carried on, and I've now handed it on to my daughter and her business partner to run Southdale. I'm more than confident that the upgrade for the human consumption poses absolutely no risk of any sort to our close neighbours or beyond. In fact, it will do the complete opposite. It will see great job opportunities along with local training grounds for huge varieties of employees, all roles within the farming and meat industry, which will teach them skills that could lead them anywhere in the world. Just on the point of the 100 notifications that the Shire staff were good enough to give me, I repeat, I've never been contacted by Shire health surveyors, by anyone from the Shire, or any member of the public in writing or formal that there has been a complaint with nut odour. All of a sudden, you tabled tonight a petition here from neighbours on the north side, the direct north side of Southdale. And as I take it most of you would live within the Shire, I'd like you to just go back on your records, if you keep weather record people, and tell me how many times the wind blows directly from the south to the north. Not a lot, I can assure you. Okay, but I'm here to support it. It will only enhance the improvement of the whole operation. Thank you for your time, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Waddell. I now ask Mr. Paul Spearing regarding item 10.5.1, update and advocacy for the 2025 state and federal government elections, to come forward and make his deputation.
Good evening, Mr. President, councillors, Shire staff and members of the public. I'd like to talk on item 10.5.1, the update on advocacy for the 2025 state and federal government elections, with particular reference to the list of priority roads. I question how the Cargottic and Abernathy Round intersection is rated so highly and why it is even on this list. At the MODAP on April 3rd, the Free Reform Schools Association was granted conditional approval to build their school at this intersection. The agreed condition was that the roundabout must be fully constructed by the applicant at its cost in accordance with the approved plans prior to the commencement of the development's operations. The applicant attempted to get the Shire to actively assist in seeking funding for this roundabout, but nothing binding was included in the final set of conditions published by MODAP. Therefore, the Shire is under no obligation to seek funding for this particular intersection. Any funding provided to the Shire for road infrastructure should be directed to other intersections that don't have external funding tied to them and not used to benefit a private entity with very little community benefit. If the Free Reform School Association want the school, then they should provide for the roundabout without any assistance from the Shire. In addition, the crash data from Main Roads Crash Summary for intersection the last 5 years doesn't warrant this intersection being placed so high on this list, with only 2 crashes occurring there in the last 5 years and only one of those requiring hospitalisation. This is less than other intersections along Cargottic Road, such as the intersection with Orton Road, which had 3 crashes in that time, with 2 of those requiring medical attention. That should be hospital, sorry. The Cargoditch Abernathy intersection doesn't even rate in the top 30 local road intersections in the Shire by crash frequency or cost. So how is it ranked as priority 1? When you take out the state roads, it is still only ranked 22nd. Then there is Hopkinson Road, which continues to be one of the most troublesome roads within the Shire. There were 61 crashes along Hopkinson over the last 5 years, which included 2 fatalities and 4 hospitalisations. I understand that the Tongan Highway extension will alleviate the pressure on some of the intersections along Hopkinson, but not all. And between now and whenever it gets finished, how many more people will die or be seriously injured along that road? I can't see any reasonable argument that would place the Cargoditch Abernathy Road intersection as a higher priority than those along Hopkinson or any of those 22 other intersections, particularly when there is already a source of funding in place. So for those 2 reasons, I'd like to put forward that the intersection of Abernathy and Cargoditch roads is removed from the list of priority roads and any potential road funding be directed to other identified priority roads. Now, while I was preparing for tonight's deputation, I noted that according to this road advocacy upgrade plan, Abernathy Road between Hopkinson and Nicholson Roads is, and I quote, narrow and cannot adequately accommodate 2-way traffic. Now, we all know that the Cathedral of Trees at the western end of Abernathy is protected, and it is known that it won't ever be able to accommodate 2-way traffic. Therefore, in all likelihood, that statement would refer specifically to the section of Abernathy between Hopkinson and Cargoditch. In relation to the above-mentioned development application, at the Ordinary Council meeting on March 18th, 2024, Councillor Duggan asked about the suitability of Abernathy Road to handle buses, particularly in respect to the bridge just to the east of Byford Meadows Drive. Mr. Trossich answered that the bridge allows 2-way traffic, including right-of-way vehicles, such as trucks up to 19 metres long. That answer contradicts what was written in the road advocacy upgrade plan and also contradicts what the main road's heavy vehicle network map shows. This would have been known to Mr. Trossich at the time he made those statements, as his upgrade plan was tabled at the council meeting back in December. Mr. Trossich's response about the bridge on Abernathy Road was not well informed. That bridge is only...
So, Mr. Spearing, I'll stop you there. This is not the venue or the time or the place to criticise any of the staff or have any shots at any of the directors. If you have any concerns about information that has been passed to council, we can give you some information about the proper channels to refer that to. But I'd ask that you desist at this time from this deputation from attacking the staff. I'm happy for you to continue as long as you are not attacking the staff.
Problems. .4 metres is a standard width for high-speed 2-lane traffic with buses. 2 standard vehicles passing each other on that bridge will allow for just under half a metre between the 2 vehicles and half a metre between each vehicle and the barriers. That's 1.36 metres to be shared across 3 gaps. Those gaps don't include wing mirrors or other external fittings, such as roof bars or side steps. Further to that particular bridge and many of the other ones in the area are known as restricted structures, including the bridge at the intersection of Cargoditch and Abernathy. That means that many types of vehicles can't cross them, including certain buses and other vehicles required for construction. Turning to my main point, I would like to reinforce my earlier argument. The Cargoditch and Abernathy intersection be removed from the list of priority roads due to already secured external funding, and that any potential funding be redirected to areas of greater need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spearing. I understand now that the CEO will leave the chambers as he has declared a financial interest in the next deputation. The next deputation is from Mr. Michael D'Agostino, and that's regarding item 10.1.7, which is reserve 19895, request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, which is lots 279 and 1343 Cargoditch Road, Oakford. Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. And thank you, Director, for assuming the position of the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and councillors, for your time. As identified, I've owned this property since 1999. I've obviously had many discussions with the Shire over the years trying to resolve the reserve. A couple of points to note. There has been no utilisation by the Shire. The reserve was vested in 1983, and so the reserve has been unutilised for over 40 years. Proximity of our house, as can be seen in the aerial picture, our house is actually located very close, approximately 8 metres, and this will make the practical utilisation of the reserve virtually impossible. The Shire approved the location of the house and it was before my time in approximately 1990, and the reserve was granted in 1983. And there's no mention of the close proximity of the house in the officer's report. The cost of moving infrastructure, our infrastructure runs through the reserve. For example, our driveway, the power, and I think the telephone line all run through the reserve from the Cargottage Road frontage and up to the house. And presumably the location of the power cable, the driveway, and etc. from the front verge was approved by the Shire when the house plans were approved in 1990. Again, this will make the practical utilisation of the reserve financially challenging, as I'll strongly argue the Shire would need to move and relocate this infrastructure, such as the existing driveway and power. Can the trees be removed to allow utilisation? As again can be seen from the aerial pic, the reserve is very well treed, and it's likely that obtaining clearing permission for these trees will be difficult. And again, there is no major issue, no mention of this issue in the report. Practical utilisation, and this is a really key point, the long and thin shape of the reserve makes its usability and function very limited. There's no mention of the dimensions of the reserve in the officer's report, but because it's so narrow, it does mean it will be difficult to utilise. As was noted in the August 2020 Shire report on the Oakford Fire Brigade, the shape of the reserve is a major challenge to utilisation. And it's not an even rectangle. As again can be seen in the picture, it's an odd rectangular shape. It's on an angle. It again inhibits the efficient utilisation of the land compared to a normal rectangular shape. The actual size is approximately 11,400 square metres, which is a relatively small piece of land. It's just over 1 hectare. And I can't find a mention of this in the officer's report about the reserve, which is somewhat surprising given the importance of this fact or this matter. And finally on this issue, the old Oakford Primary School was located 2 blocks across, and that was closed in 1998 and has since been sold. There might have been a case that the school was related to the reserve or could have been utilised or was a reason for the reserve, but again, that is now mitigated and not so relevant. So a couple of reasons why this should be resolved now. Obviously, the uncertainty. There is significant uncertainty for ratepayers and myself as a landowner. It is stressful and it's disconcerting. And I think we should all work to try and get it resolved in a practical way, taking into account the history. The intended use of the reserve is a really interesting one because it was, as the officers note, allocated as a fire brigade location. And as most people are aware, this was considered and expressly discussed. And as noted in the officer report, the original purpose being for fire brigade was considered in the working group and the council report, and the council in its resolution of August 2020 preferred the Pony Place site. And my understanding is that Shire has received land from the state at Pony Place for the new Oakford Fire Brigade, which is effectively the objective of the Officer Recommendation 1. Challenges to future development. If the Shire was to take over the reserve, then I would be left with no choice but to legally and strongly dispute each and any possible potential utilisation and development, given the proximity to my house and my business. And costs, if the Shire was to utilise the reserve, it would, as I've said, need to move the driveway, the entrance onto Cargottage Road, fencing the area. These are all significant costs and would be a large capital outlays. As you're aware, if the Shire was to agree to relinquish the reserve, then as the officers have advised in the report, it goes to the state government for consideration. There are a range of possible outcomes. And however, if the reserve is offered to me to amalgamate in my title, which I expect to be the outcome from the discussions I've had, then I'd need to pay market value for the land and all associated transactional costs. So I do have to pay market value for the land. I don't receive a concession or reduced price. Now, just turning to the officers' recommendations, option 1 was that the officers recommended the state government finds a similar piece of land in the area as a precondition. And The reality and likelihood of this happening in a timely fashion would expect it to be low, as there are very few such preserves in the proximity. I've had a discussion with Marcel from the Shire about this, and he has accepted that the chances of finding any such land are very low, if not impossible. And I am concerned that option one is set up for failure. It really can't happen. Option two is a realistic option, which would mean the matter is immediately resolved, any potential liability of the Shire, potential significant costs, and other issues such as fencing, ongoing disputes are all redundant and removed. And as identified, given that this has been going for nearly 25 years for myself and could take many more years if not resolved, then it's not in the interest or the interest of ratepayers to continue. So option two could be an option. For completeness, I have canvassed some other potential options. One is a land swap, and my position is that the reserve is a long, very narrow, odd shape. It's heavily treed with deep holes and large rocks, and it's likely the land value would be significantly less than my pristine, cleared, well-fertilised, well-seeded, productive farming land. And in reality, a value for such an odd-shaped lot with so many issues and challenges is going to be materially less than the pristine, cleared farmland that's the majority of my property. And so there's no way a like-for-like swap would be equitable. As the officers say in the report, the shape makes its viable use challenging, and common sense would say the value would also be challenging. Another option is leasing the land. This is a possibility that might be raised. I'd strongly suggest leasing is not a viable option for a number of reasons. It really is an easy way out. It just kicks it down the road. This has been going for 40 years, and really I think it should be addressed, and it doesn't address the significant and ongoing uncertainty of the Shire and for myself. Resolution of the leasing terms will not be easy. What if we don't agree? Rent, term, conditions, what happens then? And what ongoing costs would the Shire be responsible for? Fencing the land, obviously this would be a significant and draconian step, which would be strongly disputed by me legally. My legal position would be that the Shire has known of the position with respect to land for over 20 years and probably longer. The implications of this fencing would be the Shire would have to pay the costs of securing the reserve by way of fencing, and this would be, in my view, many tens of thousands of dollars. The Shire would be responsible for the ongoing upkeep of the reserve, and I'd request the Shire to put in a new driveway entrance. They'd need to move the driveway, move the infrastructure associated with that, as clearly the Shire allowed the driveway and other infrastructure to be put there in 1990 and never raised an objection to it. And this again would be a significant cost to me, tens of thousands of dollars. And there'd also likely be a legal dispute with additional costs. So what's in it for ratepayers to resolve this? In my view, to resolve a piece of land that's never been utilised in over 40 years by the Shire, and that has significant challenges to potentially utilise, may not be possible to utilise, would be a positive thing. Ratepayers get resolution of a matter that is disputed and could drag on for years, result in significant officer time and legal costs, and all potential legal issues would then be resolved in a timely fashion. This reserve was originally given to the Shire for the fire brigade site, as I've said and as the officers have noted, and it was expressly considered as part of the Oakford Fire Brigade new site and dismissed as an option. And so arguably the purpose intended is not required, and so ratepayers aren't prejudiced. Ratepayers avoid potential legal complexities associated with the reserve. This is a small piece of land. It's approximately 3 acres. It's just over a hectare. The current configuration of the reserve makes its viable use challenging, but not impossible, is what the officers have said. But for the amount of officer time and the like that could be involved for a small piece of land, means a resolution and a way forward would be in everyone's interest. Ratepayers avoid the cost of developing the reserve. It is rocky and heavily treed with large holes and would require fencing, as I've said, which have a significant cost. Ratepayers avoid the cost of maintaining the reserve. Ratepayers, I think I've covered this, but avoid the cost of relocating the driveway entrance to Cargottish Road and the associated infrastructure. And our business, Oakford Equestrian, which operates the riding lessons and horse adjustment, rescued race horses, expensive competition horses and everything in between, been going since 1999, and redeveloping the reserve would have a significant impact on our business. So in conclusion, I would ask that strong consideration be given to resolving this, not by fencing it off or leasing it back, but by relinquishing it as can be determined. This piece of land is clearly an aberration. It's possibly a mistake. Sat there for 40 years unutilised by the Shire. No one can explain why it's so oddly shaped, long and narrow and on an angle with little practical usability. And I would ask councillors to consider the fire brigade. This was the original intention of the reserve, and it's been considered and dismissed. And as the August 2020 OCM minutes note, the Shire secured additional land from the state government at Pony Place for the Oakford Fire Brigade. So the Shire has received land for the fire brigade. Usability, the shape and location of it next to my house, combined with the Shire having to incur significant costs to move the infrastructure like the driveway, etc., makes its likely use highly improbable and hugely costly and the subject of ongoing dispute.
Sorry, Mr. D'Agostino, you've got 4 minutes left.
While I acknowledge it is a difficult decision to make tonight, where the Shire can be deemed a potentially losing asset, this is an asset the Shire has never maintained or utilised in over 40 years. This is an asset that can be rationally argued will have significant costs to develop and significant complexities, given the proximity of my house and the trees. It must be created if it can ever be developed. And I'd ask you to note that knowing the report is the small size of the reserve, approximately 3 acres, and the proximity to my house noted. And I'd ask councillors to consider that in their decision the potential costs, the reality of doing it, the impact of trees, returning it to public open space or utilising it in other ways will be challenging. And the reality of being able to do that, given its long, narrow shape, the ability to use it, given the proximity to my house and my business, ongoing maintenance, are all challenging issues. I understand this is an asset. I ask you to consider, when does an asset become unviable and you take a better option? I confirm I would be prepared to offer the sum of $30,000 to the Shire if the reserve is unconditionally relinquished, to go towards officers' time of considering options, remembering I still then have to pay market value for the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. That concludes petitions and deputations. I'd ask that Mr. Martin's advice return to the chamber. Thank you, Mr. CEO, and thank you, Director of Development Services. That brings us to agenda item 5, which is the President's report. So good evening, elected members, residents and ratepayers, and welcome to the May 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. Anzac Day is one of the most significant dates in our calendar, and it was commemorated last month at Munijong War Memorial. I'd like to personally thank everyone who contributed to this important event, which enabled our community to commemorate the service and sacrifice of all Australians in wars, conflicts and peace operations. I give a sincere thanks, particularly to the Serpentine Jarrahdale RSL sub-branch, the Byford Baptist Church, Armidale City Concert Band, the Heritage Country Choir and the local schools which all took part. Thank you also to Honourable Matthew Swinburne, MLC, Member for East Metropolitan, Mr Hugh Jones, MLA, Member for Darling Range, and to my fellow councillors, being Councillor Shay Mack, Morgan Bias, who MC'd, and also Councillor Courtney Mazzini, who all attended on the morning. I sincerely thank you for doing so. National Road Safety Week was held earlier this month, and as one of the fastest growing local government areas in the country, our road infrastructure is already experiencing tremendous pressure, and we've heard that tonight from members of the public. Last month, we joined forces with the City of Rockingham to meet with Deputy Premier, the Honourable Rita Safiotti, MLA, to discuss the responsibility for Munijong Road being transferred to main roads prior to Tonkin Highway works taking place. Federal and state government support and funding of our deteriorating local road network in the face of hypergrowth is just one of the projects Australia will continue to advocate for. We'll also continue to seek government funding for the expansion of facilities at Kiernan Park and the SJ Community Recreation Centre and the development of the Jarrahdale Trail Centre. These projects are vital if our infrastructure is to keep pace with our growing community needs. Staying on this topic of roads, the Shire relaunched its Equine Road Safety campaign to coincide with National Road Safety Week. The campaign is a simple reminder of how to share the road safely, regardless of whether you're driving, walking, riding a bike or riding a horse. This month, I attended the post-budget workshop hosted by the Deputy Premier, and the CEO joined in with me to that event. It was a great opportunity to hear firsthand what the state government has planned, particularly with the election taking place on the 8th of March next year. Looking forward, the Serpentine Jarrahdale citizenship ceremony is this Wednesday, being the 22nd of May, and again we'll welcome 19 new conferees to our wonderful Shire. And these conferees come from 6 different countries, and they've all decided to make SJ their home. This month, the citizenship ceremony falls on Wear Orange Wednesday, or Wow Day, which is all about celebrating the great work of our SES crews in our community. Our new conferees will join local residents at the SES Open Night following their ceremony, giving them an insight into the important work that is done by SES. From responding to call-outs during a storm all the way through to assisting in community events, our SES volunteers go above and beyond to keep our community safe, and we thank them for their work. I also must acknowledge that this week is Volunteer Week, and again, as the Shire President, on behalf of all councillors and the staff, I sincerely thank all our volunteers in this wonderful Shire for all that they do. And it's, I know there is one member of the Lions Club still here, but certainly the Lions Club and other volunteer groups, thank you so much. Sometimes words aren't enough, so it's important we acknowledge you this week. Finally, since I came to office last year, we have strived to ensure that council business is as open and transparent to the public as possible. That's why this month we are opening Q&A sessions, usually closed to the public, for 3 months as part of a trial. This will enable our residents and ratepayers to get a better understanding of these sessions, where elected members can ask questions of each other or Shire staff as a preamble to the OCM. And some of you would have seen that tonight at 6:30 p.m. We'll continue to do all that we can to empower our local community in the democratic process. I thank you again for your attendance tonight. That brings us on to agenda item number 6, which is declaration of elected members and officers' interest. The CEO, Mr. Paul Martin, has declared a financial interest in item 10.1.7, reserve 19895, request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 279 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is that the matter involves an ex-councillor at the Shire. The extent of the interest is that an ex-councillor vote on matters pertaining to Mr. Martin's employment. Mr. Martin will excuse himself while that item is discussed. Myself, President Robert Coles, declared an impartial interest in the same item, being 10.1.7, reserve 19895, required to relinquish vesting, request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895. Lots 279 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is that I was a councillor with the landowner. The extent of the interest is impartiality. Councillor Tricia Duggan declared impartial interest again in the same item, being 10.1.7, reserve 19895, request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 279 and 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is Councillor Duggan's a friendship and fellow councillor with the landowner. The interest is impartiality, as the owner of the surrounding land is a friend and fellow councillor. Councillor Shane Mack declared an impartial interest in the same item, being item 10.1.7, reserve 19895, or request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 279 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is impartiality interest. The extent of the interest is Councillor Mack served on council with the landowner who is making the request. Councillor Morgan Bias has declared impartiality interest in the same item, being 10.1.7, reserve 19895, request to relinquish vesting over reserve 19895, lots 279 1343 Cargottage Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is impartiality. The extent of the interest is prior working relationship with the landowner during the time on council. The next declaration is Councillor Reece Jarrett declared impartiality interest in item 10.1.8. That is the item response to final connectivity and access study, Tonkin Highway Extension Project. The nature of the interest is impartiality interest. The extent of the interest is the eastern end of the Shanley Road is part of the main road study, and Councillor Jarrett lives at the westernmost end of Shanley Road. Myself, President Robert Coles, declared impartiality interest in item 10.2.2, award request for tender RFT 032024 Civil Design Indigo Parkway. The nature of the interest is my friend is an owner and director of JDSI, is one of the companies who have tendered. That is the impartiality interest. Councillor Nathan Bishop declared impartiality interest in item 10.3.8, Corporate Business Plan Performance Report, January to March 2024. The nature of the interest is impartiality interest. The extent of the interest is Councillor Bishop is a member of the Oakford Bushfire Brigade, whose future fire station this matter refers to. Councillor Nathan Bishop declared an impartiality interest in item 10.4.2, Bushfire Advisory Committee being BFAC, of the minutes and discussion paper, the impact of Cardup Career Fire Station and the extension of the Metropolitan Gazetted Fire District. The nature of the interest is impartiality interest. The extent of the interest is the item concerns a report on the impact of Cut Up Fire Station on bushfire brigades, including Ophid, which Councillor Bishop is a member. Councillor Rees-Jarrett declared an impartial interest in item 10.4.4, 2023-24 Major Event Grant Scheme, Round 2. The nature of the interest is impartial interest. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Jarrett is a past president of the Serpentine Jarrahdale Food and Farm Alliance, the event organisers of the SJ Food and Farm Fest. The last one is Councillor Morgan Bice declared impartial interest in item 10.5.1, update of advocacy for the 2025 state and federal government elections. The nature of the interest is impartiality. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Bice is a candidate in the March 2025 state election. That brings us to agenda item 7.1, which is confirmation of minutes of previous council meetings. 7.1, ordinary council meeting, 15th of April 2024. Is there a councillor who would like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item number 8, which is receipt of minutes or reports, consideration and adoption of recommendations from committee meetings held since the previous council meeting, which there are nil. That brings us to agenda item 9, which is motions of notice which has been given. 9.1 is notice of motion, revocation, OCM 34, sorry, I think that's OCM 034, March 2024, gas gun usage within the areas of Jarrahdale. Council, this needs to be broken into two things. The first part is we deal with revocation motion. Is there a councillor who's prepared to move this item? Thank you, Councillor Bice, and that is to revoke the motion. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mazzini. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Councillor Duggan, and I've also opposed to it. Councillor Bice would like to open debate.
Before I do, Mr. President, I'd confirm with the CEO. Normally we confirm the 2 seconders for revocations just to make sure the revocation motion is valid.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Councillor Bice. We only normally have 1 seconder, but on some occasions we have asked for the other 2 councillors to show their hands. I presume the other 2 councillors are still happy to do that. They've signed the documentation for that. Councillor Mazzini has seconded, so Councillor Jarrahdale, are you still happy for the revocation motion to be considered? There's only 1 seconder for the motion, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Bice. You have an open debate.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to open the debate. Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present my argument in favour of revoking Council Resolution OC 034 TAC 03 TAC 24 concerning the management of gas gun usage. After receiving feedback from our community, some of which we've heard tonight, I believe it's in the best interest of our ratepayers and local businesses to revisit this item and reconsider the matter. Firstly, the feedback received from the community, particularly those involved in the agricultural sector, who view the previous resolution as an attempt by local government to overly police and restrict the use of gas guns. These devices are legitimate tools used to protect crops from birds such as black cockatoos, which can cause severe damage to orchards and threaten the livelihoods of our farmers. Those who I've spoken with believe that introducing additional red tape and restrictions on gas guns is both unnecessary and unfair. It is seen as an undue burden on our small businesses who are already navigating numerous challenges. Secondly, the state government already has established comprehensive guidelines for the use of gas guns and other bird scaring devices, which the officers have kindly included as attachments to the published report. I refer the best practice guidelines for bird scaring in orchards and its supplementary document on noise considerations provide clear and effective best practices. These guidelines ensure that bird scaring methods are used responsibly and sustainably, balancing the needs of the agricultural industry with the protection of wildlife and the amenity of residents. Rather than duplicating these efforts at the local government level, we should align with these state guidelines as per the alternative officer's recommendation for part 2 of the motion, which I'll be seeking to move if the revocation is supported. This, in my view, will avoid unnecessary bureaucracy and confusion. Finally, there are significant environmental implications to consider. If we continue down this path and potentially begin imposing stricter local regulations on gas gun usage, we may inadvertently push orchardists towards more lethal methods of bird control, such as shooting. This could have devastating consequences for our local wildlife, including the endangered black cockatoos. Gas guns, when used according to best practice guidelines, are a non-lethal and humane method of bird control. They help protect crops while minimising harm to birds. Encouraging their responsible use aligns with our commitment to environmental sustainability and biodiversity conservation. Therefore, in conclusion, I urge my fellow councillors to support this motion to revoke the council resolution. By doing so, we can protect the livelihoods of our agricultural community, reduce unnecessary regulatory burdens, and safeguard our precious wildlife from the unforeseen consequences that may very well occur if we continue down this path. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Mazim, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll just keep this very brief. I echo a lot of Councillor Bias's comments there, but I wasn't on council at the time this decision was made, and I'd like to be part of this discussion further after doing a bit of research myself, and the alternatives such as shotguns. It is a bit of a worry for me as well, so I'd just like to explore this further and hear what other council officers have to say, and councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mazzini. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak against?
Thanks, Mr. President. I certainly would. A number of months ago, I was asked to meet with a number of the orchardists in the Jarrahdale area, and they had concerns because there is one orchardist in particular who is overusing his gas guns. An overuse of gas guns results in the birds getting used to the noise. They become acclimatised. And even worse, they actually then start finding it as their calling card. They actually get attracted to the noise and they start knowing that that's a good place for them to get food. So these orchardists have asked me to look further into what goes on in the Shire and with what we provide as advice to them. So my first question back was, well, what is it that you've had with communication with the Shire so far? And their response was that there's been lots of backwards and forwards, lots of conversations. The officers had been out on site and they had chatted to the orchardists about their concerns. And then following on from that, there was the best practice guidelines version 3.0 and 3.1 that was sent to all of the orchardists that I spoke to. So that can be perhaps assumed that all of the orchardists in the area, with a cover note from the Shire saying this is what we follow as guidelines. So I picked up the booklet and I had a read through and I got to page 4. And it says here, the local government or an independent mediator should arrange formal communication to develop a mutually agreed noise management plan for bird scaring for the orchard. A noise management plan for acoustic bird scaring devices is a document outlining negotiated conditions designed to minimise the impact of bird scaring devices on neighbours. A plan should be specific to one orchard or a collection of adjacent orchards and the surrounding neighbours. So I said to these orchardists, I said, where's your noise management plan? And they'd not been offered one. So I left the meeting and got home and did my own research and looked online, and no, I could not find a noise management plan from the Shire that is to deal with any of the orchards either down at Keysbrook or in Jarrahdale. So I extended my look into what other local governments that are similarly set up to like us, what they have got. Sure enough, Shire of Serpentine has got a noise management plan. Denmark has a noise management plan. Donnybrook Bailing Up has a noise management plan. This one has actually specifically got a name of a orchard that has got specific regulations pertaining to them. So that brings me full circle back to the notice of motion that I put up on the 18th of March, which was passed unanimously, so I never got an opportunity to share this information. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. That notice of motion says that the council requests the Chief Executive Officer to provide a report within 3 months of the date of resolution, setting out options and implications of for enhanced management of gas gun usage within the areas of Jarrahdale used for commercial orcharding. This should include information on current and historical complaints, how complaints are currently dealt with, approaches utilised by other local governments, and input and recommendations from relevant state government agencies of DBCA, DPIRD and DEWA. This is not a motion to change any procedures. It is a motion to request that we look at what we do and see if we can do better. There is an American civil rights activist named Maya Angelou, which I'm not sure if people are familiar with her, but she is credited with the saying that we do with the best we can until we know better, and then we do better. This notice of motion was simply for us to look at what we do and see if we can do better. That is all.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is anyone else like to speak for the motion? I'm going to speak against the motion, and as presiding member, I'm going to use my right to speak because I think this is important that I speak. What I would like to say.
Point of order, Shire
Yes.
President. Under what section of standing orders are you doing that? Because
Thank you. I'm glad you asked.
Mr. President, I believe it's 10.7.
I did have it flagged, Councillor Duggan. I was going to confirm. I'm actually not sure whether 10.7 is correct. I thought it was a different section, but 10.7 is order of call to debate, and it actually mentions mover, seconder, and then alternate between the two. So unless there's someone from governance that can assist, I thought it was under the administration at the end about the presiding member making determinations.
Shire President, in the absence of anyone jumping in, I'm happy to move to suspend standing orders so that you can speak out of turn.
Fine. If there's someone happy to second, thank you, Councillor Duggan. Thank you. Or anyone opposed?
Point of order, we'd still need to have a vote on.
Thank you, Councillor Vice. I was about to do that. I am very impressed with your excitement. Is there anyone opposed to suspending standing orders? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. We now suspend standing orders. And I don't like to use the power of the presiding member, but I need to speak to this as the leader of this group. What I'd like to say first and foremost is I'll remind all councillors at the table to look at section 2.10 of the Local Government Act. 2.10 of the Local Government Act is the role of councillors. And it says a councillor represents the interests of electors, ratepayers and residents of the district. Residents, ratepayers, not a single one, but several. Provides leadership and guidance to the community in the district. Facilitates communications between the community and the council. Participates in the local government's decision-making process at council and committee meetings. And performs each other's functions or such functions as given to a councillor by this Act or any other written law. A revocation motion is a motion that is not taken lightly. A revocation motion normally happens when there's new information that comes to hand or information is given at the time of debate that council is not aware of, or the person speaking for the motion says something which may not be accurate. I am somewhat concerned that councillors would support a notice of motion to revoke an item that was passed at the council meeting in March. Not only was it passed in March, it was passed unanimously. There was not one councillor who wanted to speak against the motion. There was not one councillor who asked a question. There was not one councillor who wanted further information pertaining to this motion. Have a think about what section 2.10 of the Local Government Act states. The motion that you're trying to revoke is a motion that is asking the Chief Executive Officer to provide a report within 3 months of the date of resolution, setting out options and implications for enhanced management of gas guns within the area of Jarrahdale. This is a community engagement exercise. This is not unequivocal. This motion is not going to do anything except for the CEO to write a report for us as councillors to listen to our community. It is not lost on me that an ex-councillor and a friend of the mover stood up and made a deputation tonight about this motion. There is no one else that I've heard of. There has been no one in the community that's come forward to support this. Again, councillors, I need to show leadership when leadership is required. Know what your role as a councillor is. Look at 2.10 of the Local Government Act. Start listening to the community and stop looking at personal agendas. What I would also say is look at the feedback we've got. The councillor has done her research. The councillor has acted on the advice of the community. The councillor has gone to the community and tried to allay their concerns. This is not to preclude the use of gas guns. This is not to use rifles or shotguns or any other lethal force. This is purely us going back to the community to find out what they want. I don't understand why any councillor would not want to engage with the community. While I said it's not about beating our own drums, I'm now going to beat my own drum. The whole purpose of me running for president is to have a shire that listens to our community. This motion, as passed in March, is a motion that allows us to listen to our community. It's not about personal agendas. It's not about something that we want to do to make ourselves look good. This is a motion the councillor passed because she was contacted by ratepayers. The other thing I'll say in closing is the person who made the statement tonight, I don't believe is an orchardist. It is not lost to me, councillors, that we're trying to revoke a motion and not one orchardist is here to talk to us to tell us to revoke the motion. Do I have a mover to return back to standing orders? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Is there anyone opposed? We're back to standing orders. Is there anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Vice, you'd like to close?
Before I do, I'd like to make some questions to the CEO.
Certainly.
In light of your statements, Shire President, I'd ask the CEO, was there anything defective in the request for the revocation? Are there any governance concerns that you have concerning what you received to action this tonight?
The standing orders provide that if resolutions of council have been acted upon and progressed, then revocation can't be considered, and that was not the case in this instance.
Sounds like no. My next question is concerning the statement made by the Shire President around having the information available when the decision was made. Did the officers provide those state government guidelines at that meeting, which I was unfortunately an apology for?
I might ask the Director of Development Services, but I don't think they were made available at that meeting. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, through you, Mr. President. I don't recall, I certainly don't believe there were attachments to that agenda. I think there was reference briefly in the officer report or the officer comment, but no, I don't believe they were attached.
Councillor Duggan, did you want to ask a question?
If rather than a question, if I may offer a answer, and that is that before the March meeting, I did actually circulate via email this information that has that I've referred to today. So that did include the best practice guidelines for bird scaring in orchards, the noise consideration, which is version 3.1.
Thank you, Councillor Bowles. Did that answer your question, or you got a further question?
No, I'm happy to conclude the debate.
Thank you.
I'll make the statement very, very brief, and that is, I am concerned, as Councillor Duggan mentioned, saying she's fond of, saying I'm fond of, is slippery slopes. So, oh no, wait, I do have another question actually, of the CEO. With the notice of motion that was passed and that we're seeking to revoke, what level of community consultation would the officers be undertaking in preparation of the report?
Thank you for the question. Councillor Bison, CEO, are you happy to answer?
I don't, given that we hadn't started progressing with the implementing the motion, I don't think we've scoped out what that consultation would be at this point in time, if any, to be honest.
Would you see any of that resolution?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bowles. Mr. CEO, can you provide an answer, please?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. President. I think it would be too early to say. We hadn't scoped out what that would look like at this point in time, Councillor Vice.
Thank you, Councillor Vice. Do you want to ask another question?
No, I can see where the CEO is going with his answers. So no, thank you very much. I'd simply refer back to my statement that I see this as a very slippery slope. This is a revocation that has been legitimately made. And in my view, additional information has become available. And I do not see us preventing consultation, because I don't see anything in the original motion that would have actually actioned the level of consultation that's been referred to in the debate tonight. So I'm quite comfortable with the revocation. And as I said, I'd be moving the officer's alternate recommendation, which would be emphasising the use of the state government's best practice guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. All those in favour of the revocation motion? All those against? Motion is lost 1-6. That brings us to agenda item. Sorry, Madam Secretary, okay? Thank you, Madam Secretary. That brings us to agenda item 9.2, notice of motion invitation to the Off-Road Vehicle Advisory Committee and Recreational Trailbike Riders Association to present to Council SJ 4376. Councillor Mack, this is your motion. Would you like to move it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move the elected members' recommendation as circulated.
Thank you. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Mazzini. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Agenda item 9.3, notice of motion, invitation to the West Australian Local Government Association to present to Council. Again, this is a motion that's been put forward by Councillor Mack. Councillor Mack, would you like to move this motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'd like to put forward the elected member recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings to agenda item 9.4, which is notice of motion, establishment of a Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale Youth Advisory Council. I have brought this motion forward. I'm happy to move it. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 9.5, notice of motion, the Glades at Byford Lake pedestrian overpass. Notice of motion from Councillor Mazzini. Councillor Mazzini, would you like to move the motion?
Yes, please.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 9.6, notice of motion, community debrief for the Keysbrook fire incident. This is a motion that's been brought by Councillor Bias. Councillor Bias, would you like to move your recommendation or the officer's recommendation?
Too many tabs open. Bear with me for a minute. No, I'm satisfied with the officer's alternate recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to move the officer's alternate recommendation. Is there a seconder for the officer's alternate recommendation? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings to agenda item 9.7, which is notice of motion reducing local government red tape, simplified trading partnership. Again, this has been brought forward by councillor Bias. Councillor Bias, would you like to move your recommendation or the alternate officer's recommendation?
A hybrid, if I may.
Certainly.
Let's start with the alternate officer recommendation, please. But substituting in my dot point 2 for the alternate officer's recommendation dot point 2, please.
So, councillor Bias replacing 2 with 2.
Correct, yes. Effectively, the change being that it's not prescriptive around who we work or who we consult with.
Is there a councillor who's happy to second? Thank you, councillor Bishop. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. While Madam Secretary's just catching up, I do notice there is a member from the SJ line still in the attendance. Are you here, sir, for the funding motion? So you're almost believable, but okay. I am minded to ask the council to move that we proceed to that order of business, so you can leave, but if you're happy to remain, we'll continue. Say again? No, you can, what I'm saying is no, you can please, what I'm asking is I can ask the council to move a motion that the item pertaining to the funding for the log chop we discuss now, so you're here for it. Okay, thank you. Councillors, can I have someone, I was going to get the agenda item.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. CS. 10.4.4. Can I have a councillor who's happy to move to that item of business? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Councillor Mackie, happy to second? Thank you. So it's agenda item 10.4.4. Be brought forward.
Now.
Anyone opposed to that motion? Motion is carried unanimously. So that's 10.4.4. So 10.4.4 is major grant scheme round 2. Is there a councillor who's happy to move any of the options? I'm happy to wait for people to catch up. Councillor Duggan?
I'm happy to move option 1.
So that's the officer's recommendation as per page 281.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a councillor who's happy to second that motion? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Before we move to agenda item 10, I will go through the en bloc for this evening. So as part of the Shire's efforts to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of meetings, tonight's meeting will include the opportunity for matters to be considered by council en bloc. This means that a group of matters dealt with in multiple reports can be grouped together, considered and voted upon in a single motion. Matters that are not to be included in en bloc decisions are those which require absolute majority, matters to be determined behind closed doors, declared interests made in relation to the item, and deputations or statements, made in relation to that item. Officers have prepared a list of matters that meet this criteria. I will now read these report numbers and titles and invite any elected member to identify any matters they wish to be removed from en bloc consideration. Removing a matter from en bloc consideration does not signify objection to a matter and does not require the matter to be debated. Removing a matter from en bloc simply means that the matter is to be considered separately. The matters that have been identified for consideration en bloc at tonight's meeting are as follows. Agenda item 10.1.1, which is proposed service station and fast food outlets. 10.1.2, proposed amendments to council policy, general compliance and enforcement. 10.1.4, revised draft local planning policy 4.5, short stay and temporary accommodation. 10.1.6, which is approvals of local planning policy 2.9, environmentally sustainable design considerations for retail and commercial development within the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. 10.1.11, Jersey Road, Oakford, Heritage List and Town Planning Scheme, temporary accommodation application. 10.2.1, minutes of the Rivers Regional Council meeting. 10.3.1, confirmation of payment of creditors. 10.3.2, monthly financial report. 10.3.6, correspondence from the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation. 10.4.1, head lease of State Forest number 22 between Conservation and Land Management Executive Body and the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale lease. 10.4.3, Peel Regional Trails Funding Agreement and Memorandum of Understanding with Peel Development Commission. 10.4.5 is a council policy review. 1.1.10, civic events and civic awards. And 10.5.2, Peel Regional Leaders Forum Minutes, SJ 1350. Could councillors please indicate if they wish to remove any of the aforementioned reports from the matters to be considered en bloc? That being the case, can I have a councillor to move those listed numbers to be moved en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mazzini. Anyone opposed? Those matters are moved or carried unanimously. That then brings us to agenda item 10, which is Chief Executive Officer reports. 10.1.1 has been moved en bloc. 10.1.2 similarly has been moved en bloc. 10.1.3 is proposed amendment to condition of an approved abattoir to allow increase in meat production, lot 5, 566 South Western Highway, Darling Downs. Is there a council who'd like to move one of the options? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. What would you like to move?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
The officer's recommendation as per page 88 of the agenda. Is there a councillor who is happy to second Councillor Bishop? Thank you. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Councillor Bice?
Not opposed, but a question,
Certainly.
if I may. To the CEO through the chair, I note the deputation that we had, which I didn't seem to have a hard copy of, from the gentleman from the abattoir. I just note that in the conclusion of the officer's report, it mentions that it is considered that whilst the application has some merit in some aspects, insufficient information has been provided in relation to odour, noise and traffic impacts, which will render the application, I'm assuming that's supposed to be inconsistent with the planning framework, given that it's recommending refusal. So my question is, did the officers reach out to the applicant noting those deficiencies and provide them with an opportunity to provide that information?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bice. Mr. CEO, are you happy to provide an answer, or Director of Development Services?
I'll ask the Director of Development Services if I can.
Thanks, Director.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. So the application did come in April last year. There has been a lot of back and forth on the application. I believe we have attempted to elicit the information that we need. We haven't been able to receive the information that we need, so the reasons recommended for refusal do reference the concerns around insufficient evidence / information on those points of noise, odour and traffic.
Thank you. Councillor Bice, you have another question?
Supplementary, if I may.
Yes.
There's nothing precluding the applicant to, if council were to continue with the motion on the table being a refusal, there's nothing that precludes the applicant from making another application and providing that information.
Thank you, Director. Development Services.
Thank you for the supplementary question, and through you, Mr. President. I believe probably the course of action would be a written request for the tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, to review the matter. So often having the State Administrative Tribunal process enacted provides the opportunity for a mediation to occur, and may be a next logical step for the applicant to consider. That's open to all applicants who are aggrieved with a decision that's made, whether it's an approval with conditions or a refusal stating reasons. So that would be what would be communicated to the applicant.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. That has got me thinking, Director, if I can ask a question, in relation to a deferral, would a deferral assist the applicant in answering those questions, or are you saying that the opportunity, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe I'll just leave it as that. Do you think a deferral might assist the applicant?
Thank you for the question. I think the issues are very significant at this moment in time. So I think we need to draw a line on, I think from my perspective, I'd feel more comfortable drawing a line, but of course I'm in council's hands. Either way, I don't believe it's the end of this process. I believe that there will be subsequent steps, whether it's through the tribunal process or a new application into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We have got a mover, we've got a seconder. Was anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. 10.1.4 has been passed en bloc. That brings us to 10.1.5. At 10.1.5 is requests for payout of developer contributions credits to G&G Corp Proprietary. Is there a councillor who's happy to move the officer's recommendation or another option? Sorry, Councillor Duggan, you happy to move the officer's recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President.
Is there a councillor who's happy to second that officer's recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. 10.1.6 has been passed en bloc. 10.1.7.
Mr. President, I've declared a financial interest in 10.1.7, so I'm going to leave the room.
I'll just wait for the Director of Development Services to assume the chair before I announce this motion, or this agenda item, I should say. 10.1.7 Reserve 19895 request to relinquish vesting over Reserve 19895 lots 279 and 1343 Cargodditch Road, Oakford. There are numerous or several alternate motions. I will ask anyone who would like to move any of those motions.
Mr. President, I'd like to move the motion I circulated earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. So the one that has been circulated, which I believe is on the screen now, can you just confirm that is correct motion, Councillor Bishop?
That is correct, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Is there a seconder for the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor, question, Councillor Mack? Sure.
I wonder if it might be possible to seek permission to put an amendment to the motion before I would consider whether I'll be opposed to it.
Did you want to ask the question first, Councillor Mack, or are you happy to, you want to go straight to an amendment?
It goes straight to an amendment.
What's your amendment?
One moment, sorry. I would consider that the alternate motion as put forward by Councillor Bishop, point 2 be changed to read, request that the Chief Executive Officer advise the landowner of lot 208 Cargodditch Road, Oakford, the landowner, and the Development of Planning, Lands and Heritage, that it will agree to relinquish the Shire's vesting over Reserve 19895 if the landowner agrees to make an ex gratia repayment in the sum of $30,000 to the Shire, and B, the responsible minister agrees to make all proceeds from the sale of the land available to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale in a suitable trust form to be expended on the direct improvement of public open spaces in the vicinity of the locality.
Thank you, councillor Mack. As the mover, councillor Bishop, are you happy with that amendment to your alternate motion?
I would not be happy with that amendment, Mr. President.
Okay. So what we're going to have to do now is then we will vote on the amended item to the substantive motion. All those in favour?
Point of order.
Yes.
Point of order. There's no seconder to the amendment.
Thank you, councillor Voss. Is there a seconder to?
While that's being prepared, Mr. President, can I ask a question of the director?
Certainly.
Is that even legally possible? Not quite sure how else I can ask the question, but is that within the realm of what the minister can do?
Director of Development Services.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. The minister is ultimately empowered under the Land Administration Act to deal on Crown land. If I understand the alternative or the amendment correctly, it would be about asking the minister to agree to make I'll just wait so I can see the actual resolution. So if you could just scroll down, please. Yeah. So as the way I'm reading that, it's about seeking the responsible minister to agree to make the proceeds from the sale of this Crown land available to the Shire in a suitable trust form to be expended on the direct improvement of POS in the vicinity of the locality. Ultimately, the minister can ultimately decide what they wish to do with the proceeds of sale of Crown land. I wouldn't necessarily be able to say there is any degree of certainty around this, because the minister will obviously, protect his position. He's ultimately responsible to the public through the Parliament. It's not to say he may not consider this, but there's not to say that he would consider this.
Thank you, Director. Do you have a follow-up question, councillor Voss? So we've got a mover of the amendment. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
Sorry, Mr. President, could I just ask a question?
Certainly.
From a Shire perspective, are there any implications for accepting the ex gratia payment of the $30,000 from the adjacent landowner? I don't know much about these payments. I don't know how they work, what's required. If I could get some more information on that, would be great.
Thank you for the question, councillor. Director, are you happy to provide an answer?
Certainly. Thank you for the question through you, Mr. President. I guess the ultimate decision will be that of council to make. The alternative officer recommendation, which was option 2, makes no mention of an interest in any ex gratia payment. There are obviously staffing hours that have been spent on advancing this matter. Those staffing hours, like any matter that comes before council, quickly add up. And so, I understand the ex gratia payment has been offered to essentially reflect that officers are having their sunk costs in terms of salaries and wages directed towards dealing with this matter. But yeah, I guess the alternative option 2 in the officer report didn't foreshadow or give any indication as to an ex gratia payment being being a relevant issue or concern for officers.
Thank you, Director. Did that answer your question, Councillor Mazzoni?
Thank you, yes.
I'll call for a seconder again for the amendment that Councillor Mack has moved. Is there a seconder? I'm happy to second it for debate. Is anyone opposed? Thank you, Councillor Bishop and Councillor Duggan. Councillor Mack, would you like to open debate?
Yeah, thank you. I'll make this very brief. This is a pocket of land which is currently vested to the Shire's use. I guess I would be looking at saying that land is valuable for the Shire. It is a Shire asset. It is a ratepayer asset. Our ratepayers are the ones that will be losing out if we do give up our interest in this plot of land, and I believe that we should be adequately compensated for that. And this would allow us to keep a future funding in a trust to allow it to be spent on a future public open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I'll reserve. Councillor Bishop, do you want to speak against?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I don't think it's a good look for our Shire to have spent over 40 years figuring out a use for this reserve. Back in 1983, its original intention was to be for a bushfire brigade depot. In 1989, there was a request by council to revest the reserve land for new municipal purposes, and at that time, the Shire communicated that the reason for doing so was to ensure that the land was available for the Oakford Bushfire Brigade, which remains situated on private land and still does, albeit in 2020, the Shire acquired 2 hectares of land at Lot 106 Wills Place to accommodate that fire brigade station. I see this piece of land as a symbol of a Shire looking to hold on to an option. And I don't think that with this motion I brought, that the amendment Councillor Mack has suggested does anything more than hold on to an option. We see this piece of land that was gifted to us for a purpose as something we're entitled to. And I don't think it's fair on the nearby landowner for us to put our hands out to the minister and that this motion only succeed on the basis that the minister agrees that the proceeds of the sale go into our pockets. I think that is expressly what's not intended with the motion, and I'd ask that you do not support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Is there anyone else would like to speak for the amended motion? Councillor Mack, would you like to close?
Yeah, thank you. As I said, I think this is important. It is a ratepayer asset. It is not a Shire asset. It is our ratepayers that have an interest in this. We will soon be discussing our rates and what we're going to do for our rates, and if we can look for avenues to ensure we are maximising what we're getting out of the value of this land we currently have an interest in, I think we should be exploring that. I'd also add, this isn't new. This has been done in other Shires. Other Shires have put together requests to ministers for proceeds to be put in trust for future uses from the sale of Crown land. So I don't think we're breaking any new ground here. I think it's a good amendment that'll work in the interest of the ratepayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. All those in favour of the amended motion? Sorry, all those in favour of the amended motion? So all those against? Motion is lost 2-5. That brings us back to the substantive motion, which we had a mover being Councillor Bishop, seconder being Councillor Duggan. Was there anyone opposed to this motion? Councillor Mack? Anyone else opposed to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor Bishop, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll repeat much of what I've already said. As I've said previously, this land was vested with the Shire in 1983 for the purposes of a bushfire brigade depot. In 1989, at Council's request, that purpose was changed to municipal purpose, and the Shire
expressed that this was due to the Oakford Bushfire Brigade being located on private land. And, you know, the insecurity of that tenure might mean that the need for that land to make available a new fire station meant the Shire kept that land available to itself. In 2020, this same reserve was considered as part of an extensive selection process and was subsequently excluded from being the future location of the Oakford Fire Station. And I'd point out that there appears to be some concerns in the officer's report around giving up this section of land and not being provided a like-for-like replacement. I would point out that to facilitate the new Oakford Fire Station, the Shire did in fact receive 2 hectares of land located at Lot 106 Wills Place, Oakford, from the WA Planning Commission. Throughout the history of this land, some 42-year history that has been vested with this Shire, a suitable use for that reserve land has not been identified, and we've heard from the landowner tonight about the likely unsuitability of many uses of that land. I think on that basis, and given the landowner is prepared to make an ex gratia payment of $30,000 to the Shire, you know, out of his own goodness, that's not necessary if council were to consider this motion, but he's put it on the table, and I hear what Councillor Mack has said around our ratepayers. Now, I would point out this is not our land. This is land that belongs to the state, which was vested with us, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to stick out our hand to, sorry, I've gone off track a bit here. Look, I'll sum it up by saying I don't think it's appropriate for us to, just as we've discussed previously around seeking money from the minister from the proceeds of the sale, I don't think it's appropriate to look at what we can get in these situations, whether we get an equivalent piece of land from the landowner. I think this is a happy middle ground where the landowner has agreed to make a payment to the Shire, and that we can agree that over 42 years we've had no use for the land. Its first intended use has been satisfied by the location of Lot 106 Wills Place, and I would ask that council support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll speak, but only briefly, thanks. I think Councillor Bishop has covered the points that I'd like to make quite well. The only thing that I would like to add is point 3, the payment of $30,000. I see that is as being a useful payment for the Shire staff to be able to look at alternate options from Crown land for us to vest elsewhere. So with that, I support the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Matt, do you want to speak against?
Thank you. I will be brief. A lot of it's already been said. I will state, as was mentioned in debate, about what do we get. I'd say it's not about what we get, it's about what we can get for our ratepayers. I will continue to fight for what is in the best interest of our ratepayers. Land is valuable. It's not always going to be in abundance. Whilst we sit in a position now where in the Shire we are still developing and it is abundantly available, that will not always be the case. We will not always get vested new pieces of Crown land, and I think it's important that we hold on to what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Bishop, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would restate that in 42 years, there's been no suitable use for Reserve 19895 identified other than being for the Oakford Bushfire Brigade. 42 years is far too long to be kicking this can down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion. Sorry, get everyone against, please. I missed that. So motion is carried 5-3. Thank you. Can we please ask Mr. CEO to come back? Thank you. 4-3. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. It was, yeah. Thank you. 4-3, Madam Secretary. You probably picked up on it anyway. Thank you. Thank you. We'll talk amongst ourselves. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Alternate motion was carried. I'll get it right this time. 4-3. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.8, which is response to final connectivity and access study, Tonkin Highway Extension Project. Is there a councillor who'd like to move one of the options? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Which option are you moving?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the officer's recommendation? I'm happy to second it. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us on to 10.1.9, consideration of draft terms of reference, community reference group for permacast operations. Is there a councillor who's happy to move one of the options? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Which option are you moving?
Once again, officer's recommendation. Thank you.
The officer's recommendation as per
Page 146.
146. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the officer's recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is anyone opposed? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.10, update regarding draft master plan for lot 500 Lapita Road and request for West Australian Planning Commission to initiate Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment, lot 500 Lapita Road, Mardella. There is a alternate motion that has been circulated. Councillor Duggan, are you wanting to move that?
Thanks, Mr. President. I would like to move an alternate motion, but it's actually different to what is stated here, please.
Certainly.
The alternate motion is that the consideration is that we defer consideration of seeking to amend the zoning of lot 500 Lampeter Drive, Mardella, under the Metropolitan Region Scheme until it can be discussed at a PCF in the first instance.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. So is that the motion in its entirety, or does it continue with the rest as circulated?
That's its motion. That's the motion in its entirety. Thanks.
Councillor Duggan, you happy with as written on the screen? Did you want a time on that policy concept forum? Were you not concerned?
No, thanks. I'm not concerned about time. I'm more concerned about it being done right. Thanks.
And just remove the 0.1, so it just says defers.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed to the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor. The motion is carried unanimously. And we'll need a reason, councillor Duggan, for the, is that what you're going to say, Mr. CEO? Thank you.
President Coles, I was wondering if I may be given the opportunity to do a brief personal explanation on why this notice of motion has gone through as it has, please.
I don't think that's necessary, but I would ask that you do a reason for difference unless you need to make your
Certainly.
personal explanation.
No, that's
reason.
fine. Thank you.
I think we can leave that for the PCF. Thank you.
The reason for difference, let me grab the right bit of paper, is to allow further consideration of the requirements of the Equine Trails Master Plan.
Can you just pause there because Madam Secretary's typing as your.
My apologies. Yes.
Equine Trails Master Plan.
Yep. Before this land is considered for rezoning. The trails and the master plan is just meant to have capitals too. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Can you just confirm you're happy with that as it's written on the screen?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That brings us to agenda item 10.1.11, which has been moved en bloc. Agenda item 10.2.1. Is infrastructure services report, minutes of the Rivers Regional Council, which has also been moved en bloc. 10.2.2 is award request for tender RFT 03/2024 civil design Indigo Parkway. Is there a councillor who's happy to move an option? Councillor Duggan, which option are you moving?
Happy to move officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is there a councillor who's happy to second the motion? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Anyone opposed? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried unanimously. 10.3.1 has been moved on block. So too has 10.3.2. Uh, 10.3.3 is March 2024 quarterly budget review. Is there a councillor who's happy to move a option in relation to this agenda item? Thank you, councillor Duggan. And you're happy to move the officer's recommendation?
Yes, thank you.
Is there a councillor who's happy to second this item? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Anyone opposed to this item? Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to agenda item 10.3.4. 10.3.4 differential general rates and minimum payments. Is there a councillor who's happy to move the officer's recommendation or any other option? Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is anyone happy to second the option as moved by councillor Duggan, which is the officer's recommendation, correct? Yeah. Thank you, councillor Bishop. Is anyone opposed? Thank you, councillor Bias. Councillor Duggan, are you happy to open debate?
Thanks, Mr. President. This has been discussed in our workshops prior to this. I thought that we were all quite strongly in agreement for where we have come so far. And I just feel that this is a reflection of our open and frank discussions to this date. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Councillor Bishop, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Bishop. Councillor Bias, would you like to speak?
Thank you for the opportunity to raise my objection to this motion. I do have a number of concerns that I'm happy to touch on. First of all, I believe it's premature to proceed with advertising of draft rates at this stage. The timeline presented to us for the budget process at the February OCM has shifted left and blown out. We have not yet had a workshop on the proposed operating expenditure component of the budget, yet we're being asked to advertise and seek public comment on the proposed rates. In my opinion, it is essential that we have a comprehensive understanding of the proposed operating expenditure before endorsing any rate yield. Without this critical information, how can we, in good faith, provide an in-principle endorsement of a rate yield on which the advertised rates are calculated? I fear this approach undermines the integrity of our budgeting process. Transparency and due diligence require that we as a council thoroughly review and understand all aspects of our budget, including the operating expenditures, before making any decision on the rating yield. Yes, it can be argued that this motion is simply approving the advertising component. However, proceeding to advertising the proposed rates without this foundational step is not only premature in my view, but borderline irresponsible. Furthermore, I'm opposed to point 4 of the motion, which suggests conducting the budget breakfast only after the budget has been adopted. In the previous 2 years, we have held the breakfast during the advertising period before the budget has been adopted. This timing provides an additional avenue to get valuable feedback on the draft budget and promotes a more collaborative approach with our community. Engaging with the community before finalising the budget ensures that their voices are heard and considered in the decision-making process, rather than simply informing them of the decision that has already been made. In conclusion, I urge my fellow councillors to reconsider this motion and reject it. We need to ensure that our budget process is thorough, transparent and inclusive. Let's take the time to properly review the operating expenditure component of the budget first, engage with our community meaningfully with the budget breakfast and make an informed decision before going out for advertising. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anyone who'd like to speak for the motion? I'm happy to speak for the motion. And this is a challenge. It always is a challenge when we look at setting rates and we look at the expenditure and revenue. And we've had many a discussion, certainly over the years, in relation to rates and how we do it. I guess a couple of points I'll make. One is under the system of local government, there has to be that relationship with staff and councillors. I'm always vocal about rates, and I think the workshops that we've had to date show the robust nature of councillors. But I think more importantly, and probably more prudent for me, is a robust nature of the staff and what the team have done under the Director of Corporate Services. We've got a line-by-line item. There is a science behind the rates. This is not a figure that has been plucked. It is not the world according to Mr. Fraser Sullivan Esquire. It's not the world according to Mr. Paul Martin Esquire. This is work that the staff have done for a long time, and it's not something that has just happened since the 1st of January 2024, or as a member of the public made a comment tonight, since the 23rd of October 2023. This has been something that's been going on for a period of time. This is something that the Shire workers, the Shire staff, the executive management team have put time, effort and expertise into. It's always challenged being a councillor, and I did talk about Section 2.10 of the Local Government Act tonight. It is challenging for us. We need to have that balance between what our community expects and what we can do to deliver the expenditure versus what we have coming in. So revenue against expenditure. I guess the other key point is this is not setting the rates. What this is doing is going out to advertising to enable community feedback. And I do acknowledge the points that have been made. The community breakfasts in the past, whilst they have been successful to some extent, again, it's a very, very subjective point of view. When you do the breakfast, when the rates are out for advertisement to get people's feedback, or do we give it a go and try something new? And once the rates are adopted, once the rates are set, do we then explain to the community why we have done it? And I think that's probably an interesting thing for me, and I've thought long and hard about this, is when is the right time to engage with the community? The answer to that, it's not a rhetorical question, the answer is all the time. So it's not a case of us having a breakfast and inviting 50 people here to find out what they want about the budget. It's about us as councillors going out and talking to the community. It's about us as councillors doing community in the community at the last Saturday of the month at the SJ Farmers Markets. It's us as councillors going out and engaging. I think it'd be very dangerous to rely on feedback at a breakfast for how we set the rates. I like the idea. I think someone says if you keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, it's the definition of insanity. This is an opportunity for us to actually set the budget. And this, again, this motion is only to go out for advertising. It will then come back for council to set that budget. And then whatever that budget will be, whatever that rate in the dollar will be, whatever the amount and percentage is, we then tell the community why we have done it. It's not a case of, hey, community, what do you want? Oh, we want a 0 rate increase, or we want a 0.5 decrease. That might come out from a breakfast, but then how do we then implement that, which it won't be a 0.5% decrease, who knows what it's going to be, but then how do we go back and sell that or explain to the public why we as a council have come up with a percentage? It needs to be understood by the community. It needs to be sold by the council. It needs to be understood and basically value for money with that expenditure versus the revenue. So I commend this motion. I also commend the staff. And I'm a little bit disappointed that Mr. Sullivan's not here tonight. He probably won't believe that I've actually said this, but I commend the work he's done. And as I've said, this is purely to go out to request the feedback from the community and then to have the breakfast once the budget is adopted so we can explain to the community, we can show why we set the rate in the dollar as it is, and we move forward. So I commend this motion. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. I guess for me, it's not just about the workshops that we've attended, but it's also about the fact that we are provided with monthly budget information that comes to our OCMs. We also have quarterly reports. So all these things keep us regularly up to date with where the budget's going, where the costs are going. We tie that with the fact that our officers are in touch with what their intended costs and requests for staffing is for the following financial year. And it gives us a very reliable chance to know what it is that the required rate for advertising should be. I do hear the concerns about point 4, about the breakfast being following the adoption. But one thing I do know from seeing a few of these budgets now is that variations are always occurring. So if someone comes up with some fabulous words of wisdom, that information can always be used and be put into a budget variation later on down the track. So for that motion, I commend, for that reason, I commend this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of the motion?
Sorry, Mr. President. I'm not sure if I'm out of step here, but am I able to exercise my right to speak?
I'm happy to give you that latitude.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to stress that in seconding this motion, and obviously we're about to go to the vote, the cost of everything is going up, including doing local government business. Advertising a rate that's not inconsistent with increases in the cost of living, and advertising early allows our families in the community to balance their household budgets. And now is not the time to get political, but it's a time to come together as a council to fairly balance our own budgets, just as we expect our community would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. All those in favour of the motion? Got it right this time. All those against? Motion is carried 5-2. That brings us to agenda item 10.3.5. 10.3.5 is councillor fees and allowances 2024-2025. Is there a councillor who's happy to move any of the motion, any of the options for this motion? Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'd like to move option 2, resolves following councillor fee and allowance entitlements for the 2024-25 financial year being 75% of the Band 2 allowance and $2,500 for the ICT allowance, please.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is there a councillor who's happy to second this motion, which is option 2? I'm happy to second it purely for debate. Is there anyone opposed? Thank you, councillor Matt. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate?
Thanks, Mr. President. Currently, we're sitting on, from memory, about 71%. It used to be 75% of the Band 2 sitting fees. And then we determined last financial year to not increase with the increase in band fees. I think that we set a dangerous precedent when we start working our way away from that 75%. We have 6 councillors and 1 president, compared to previous years where there were 9 members on council. And so that means that those of us who are at this table are working extremely hard. And I feel that to bring it back to the 75% is appropriate to reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. I will reserve. Councillor Mack, would you like to speak against?
Yeah, thank you. I will point out that I'd like to foreshadow if this motion is lost, I would put forward option 1. Option 2 does involve an increase in sitting fees for councillors. And I just do not believe that at this point in time that will be palatable to our ratepayers. Our ratepayers would be under the pump with cost of living pressures at the moment, and I think that that would be in their interest for us to remain as we are. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Mack. Does anyone else like to speak for the motion? That being the case, councillor Duggan, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm happy for it to go to the vote.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is lost 2-5. Councillor Matt, you foreshadowed option 1.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
All those, sorry, is there a seconder for option 1? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Is there anyone opposed to option 1? Motion is carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 10.3.6, which has been passed en bloc. 10.4. Where are we? 10.3.7 is culture and values workshop next steps. Is there a councillor who's happy to move any of the options? Councillor Duggan?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Duggan's officer's recommendation as per page 220.
Yes, thank you.
Is it a seconder for that motion? Thank you, councillor Jarrett. Is there any councillors opposed to this motion? Thank you, councillor Bias. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate?
Certainly, thanks, Mr. President. As a group of councillors, we literally have nothing in common except for the fact that we've been elected to these positions. What that means is we need to take every opportunity we can to ensure that we are working well together, that we know each other's communication styles, and that is how we will result in the best outcome for our residents. I totally understand that $22,000 is a significant amount of money. I have felt that the previous workshops we've done with this group have been quite successful, and it's sometimes given us a chance just to let our hair down a little bit and have a laugh at ourselves and each other. And I think that that's a very important part of team building. So with that, I support the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Councillor Jarrett, do you want to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve.
Thanks, councillor Jarrett. Councillor Bice, would you like to speak against?
Thank you, Shire President. Thank you for the opportunity to speak against the proposed next steps for the culture and values workshops. While I understand the intention behind these workshops, I have serious reservations about their efficiency and the value they provide to our ratepayers. Firstly, I don't believe that the effort and expenditures made to date have provided our ratepayers with a good return on their investment. Despite the time and resources already committed, there has been little tangible evidence, in my opinion, to suggest that these workshops have brought about any significant improvements or benefits. Continuing down this path seems to me like throwing good money after bad. The outcomes purported by these workshops, i.e. fostering better culture and values within culture, are admirable, but I remain unconvinced that they will be achieved through this particular process. Instead, we risk further expenditure without any guarantee of meaningful results. In conclusion, I urge my fellow councillors to reconsider the continuation of these workshops. We must provide initiatives that offer clear, direct benefits to our community and ensure prudent use of ratepayer funds. If this motion is defeated, I will move option 2, being that council does not continue with further culture and values workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Bice. I will speak for the motion. And I was literally standing on the fence of this, and I didn't know which way to go. And I reflected upon what we've achieved. And I guess whilst it's a significant amount of money, it hasn't been lost on me that council keeping the same sitting fees that they've been on since 2020. I don't think there's many organisations where people haven't had a pay rise in 4 years. And that's a decision made by council tonight, which I supported. But these things are important. So the money that we've saved by not going up to the 2024 allowance set by the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal enables us to use those funds to do something in this vein, which is to do training for council and the executive management group. And I think that's a key part. It's not just about us as councillors, it's also about the executive management group. I hear the comments that have been made, and I guess I certainly would have a list of things that I think have been a tangible benefit from the collaboration with Mint and the work that we've done. The fact that we came together and spoke, I was very honest, transparent, and talked about issues that I've had in the past. That may or may not have helped, but I'll tell you one thing, council, it certainly hasn't hurt what we've done. And I reflect upon what we as a team, and the CEO and I talk about whether we're a team or a partnership. We're probably a partnership between council and the executive management group. But I guess, I'm not sure if it's a rhetorical question or not, but what benefit is there to our ratepayers of a council working better together? What benefit is there to our ratepayers for staff being happy to be here? What benefit is there for our ratepayers, for us as councillors to walk into this place on the third Monday of the month and not have PTSD or be stressed or be worried about walking to this place because of relationships in this place? I don't think this collaborative or Mint collaboration will solve all our problems, but it'd be really crazy not to give it a go. We've done 2 sessions, and the first session I thought was very beneficial, and I admit not all councillors were there. And now I think probably more than ever we need to do the final workshop to close it all off, because we have now got a new member of the team. And I use that term on purpose. We are a team. We may not always agree, as tonight has shown, but we need to be respectful and we need to acknowledge each other. We need to acknowledge our strengths, our weaknesses, and what we all bring to the table. If this costs us $100,000 and we improve things, I'm happy to spend $100,000. This is going to cost us about $22,000, which I admit is a significant amount. We have just saved the ratepayers, make sure I get this amount correct, we've just saved our ratepayers $17,800, nearly $18,000, for not taking an increase to our sitting fees, which the Salaries and Allowance Tribunal has set. It's not what we've set, it's what the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal have set. And it's quite interesting being the president meeting other mayors. There's not many local councils that would work as hard as what we do with 7 councillors and get paid the amount of money that we get paid. I think that speaks volumes of the people at this table. We're prepared to do this for the right reasons. We're prepared to do this for the benefit of the community. We are prepared to work together, and this is the icing on the cake. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, and it certainly is not a waste of ratepayers' money. I'm happy to go on the record and say the money we save on sitting fees can be diverted for us as a team, and I'll use that word again, us as a team to work together. I commend the motion. Was anyone who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor Mack.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start just by echoing a little bit of what Councillor Bice said, and that I also haven't seen any tangible benefits out of the 2 sessions that we've had going past. In fact, I can somewhat see the opposite. A couple of the mentions in debate for why we should go for this. It's 22K to have a laugh together. Is that what we need to do to be amicable together? Is to spend that money? Are there not other ways that we could be amicable together? And to say that it has not hurt to give it a go, it does hurt. It hurts us financially. It's $22,000 that we are going to put towards this. So if we cannot see any tangible benefits that are coming from it, I will not support spending the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. I find it interesting that we sit here debating tangible benefits when we don't have anything that we can compare it to, because there's never been a time when we hadn't been under one of these workshops. So I find that a little intriguing. As far as the worthiness goes, worthiness is subjective. If people wish to embrace things, they tend to get more out of them. And with that, I sincerely hope that if this motion does pass, the money spent by our ratepayers for these sessions does actually get spent well, and that the sessions embraced by the councillors, and so then we will get the most out of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion is carried 4-3. That brings us to agenda item 10.3.6, sorry, 10.3.8. Apologies, that's Corporate Business Plan Performance Report, January to March 2024. Is there a mover of one of the options? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. What would you like to move?
Happy to move officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. That's option 1. Is there a councillor who's happy to second this motion? Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Councillor Bice. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate, please?
Thanks very much, Mr. President. So we've had the opportunity through the Q&As to discuss with the officers where these concerns have been shown. We've asked questions both on the night and also afterwards. So we accept, well, I accept the performance report and adopt it as part of the corporate business plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Jarrett. Councillor Bice, would you like to speak against?
Thank you, Shire President. Yes, we have been able to ask questions. It doesn't mean that I'm happy with the responses. I'd like to draw Council's attention to the status of 2 key projects as outlined in the Corporate Business Plan Performance Report, those projects being the Oakford Bushfire Brigade Station and the Kiernan Park Recreation Precinct construction of Stage 1A. Both projects are currently listed as at risk or behind target, but I believe this categorisation fails to capture the urgency and seriousness of the issues we are facing. The current categorisation of at risk or behind target suggests that minor issues are putting the achievement of project deadlines and service levels at risk, and that these issues are being managed by routine procedures. However, this does not adequately reflect the urgency of the problems associated with these major projects. I formed the view that both projects should be listed as critical, indicating that major issues have prevented the projects from progressing and that significant action is required to rectify these issues, which are likely to be ongoing into future reporting periods. Without a renewed sense of urgency or focus on these projects, I fear we're unlikely to see them meet their timelines. The Oakford Bushfire Brigade Station, for instance, requires a more substantial remedial action beyond routine procedural management. The current response, such as a report on this project will be presented to council at a future ordinary council meeting, is insufficient. We need concrete, immediate actions to address the delays and get this critical infrastructure back on track. Regarding the Kiernan Park Recreation Precinct, it is concerning that this project has been listed as at risk or behind target for every quarter in this reporting cycle. This consistent reporting undermines the confidence in our ability to deliver on this significant community project. Unless we take decisive action, I have little confidence that we will see this project back on track by the Q4 report due in July. For both projects, we need to escalate the urgency of our response. Simply continuing to list projects as at risk or behind target quarter after quarter will not solve the issues, and neither will remedial action of bringing another report to council at some unidentified point in the future. We have a responsibility to ensure that the Oakford Bushfire Brigade Station and the Kiernan Park Recreation Precinct receive the focused attention they require, and which is why I cannot support this motion or endorse this report in its current form.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Does anyone else like to speak for the motion? I'm happy to speak for the motion. As alluded to, we were given the opportunity on several occasions to talk to the staff about this. It was more formalised at workshops and more recently at the Q&A, which there were some questions asked in relation to this. I guess for me, again, it comes down to that balancing of what we're here to do, that relationship with staff and that confidence that we as elected members have in relation to the staff and the process. In relation to that, on page 221 of the agenda, in the last paragraph there, it talks about what the corporate business plan is about. And it's a 4-year delivery program aligned to the Shire's integrated planning and reporting framework, strategic community plan, annual budget, long-term financial plan, and other supporting strategies. The purpose of the plan is to operationalise the community's vision and the Shire's strategic objectives. So it is a very, very important document, and I don't for a moment want to play down what Councillor Bias has said. I guess that the other thing for me is 79% of the projects are on track or complete, 16% are at risk or behind target. That is a concern for me. And when we talk about specifics such as Kiernan Park and also the Oakford Bushfire Station, those two things have been brought to Council's attention. All councillors are aware of the issues with those two projects. And quite frankly, the staff have been open, transparent and honest in relation to how to fix that. We now have strong project management places or forms and structures in place after the Abernethy Road situation. So I have confidence in the staff. I have confidence in the plan. In relation to Kiernan Park, there are some issues there, and that is coming to a workshop in the next couple of weeks. That will be a workshop that perhaps is as a result of us identifying, or the staff identifying to council that project is one of the 16% that's at risk or behind target. I have confidence that when the staff explain to us at a workshop the issues there and the plan that they have in place to fix that, I'm confident that we can move forward in line with what the community expects. Same with the Oakford Bushfire Station. There is a concern there that was raised, and I think the key thing is with that, and I use an analogy of marking your own homework. It certainly wasn't the case of us marking our own homework, but it's actually, whilst it may be seen as a negative, I think it's a positive in terms of the issue was resolved. The issue was identified. The issue was resolved. The CEO acted quickly. He was able to be agile and make a decision under his delegated authority, and that is why it's come back to council as yellow, being at risk. He could have potentially changed the status to that, but I think the honesty and the integrity speaks volumes that there has been some concerns with the development approval and the tenders. That was identified, and again, that will now be remediated. So I think, actually I don't think, I know and I have confidence in this report, and I have confidence with the motion as presented. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. I find all this rather intriguing because the actual recommendation just asks us to note the performance report. So that is just asking us to be aware of what the officers have said and how they feel that their performance has gone. There is an opportunity to ask questions. There is an opportunity to seek out information any day and every day via our emails, and this is not to go against this motion is not the appropriate time to be doing that. All the recommendation is that we note how the officers feel that we are performing and that we adopt those amendments to the corporate business plan as this report outlines. And if we have any questions or we have concerns, or we can always ask those questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? Motion is carried 6-1. That brings us to agenda item 10.4.1, head lease of State Forest number 22. That has been passed en bloc. Um, 10.4.2, there is a disclosure of interest from Councillor Bias, which I will hold here until we see if there's any council wants to move any motion in relation to 10.4.2, which is Bushfire Advisory Committee, BFAC, minutes and discussion paper, the impact of Cardup Career Fire Station and the extension of the Metropolitan Gazetted Fire District. I believe there is an alternate motion as circulated by Councillor Bishop.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd
You
like
just-
to move.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you happy to move that?
Yes,
Just pause and I'll just read out the declaration that Councillor Bias has submitted, and that is in relation to this item 10.4.2 on the 20th of May 2024, impartiality interest. The nature of Councillor Bias' interest is the alternate recommendation has introduced an advocacy point. The extent of Councillor Bias' interest is he will be a candidate in the 2025 state election. That is recorded. Councillor Bishop, I'll go back to you now for your alternate motion.
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. The alternative motion is the officer's recommendation with an additional 0.4. Do you guys have a copy over there? Yeah. And I move that motion, Mr. President.
Sorry, Councillor Bishop, is that per the red writing on the screen?
That is correct.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anyone opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. And we need a difference to the officer's recommendation, please, Councillor Bishop.
Yes, the reason would be to ensure the local government utilises all avenues available to provide funding for much needed brigade facilities upgrades. Brigade facilities upgrades? Yeah.
You happy with that wording, Councillor Bishop?
The next item on the agenda is 10.4.3, Peel Regional Trails Funding Agreement and Memorandum of Understanding. That has been passed en bloc. 10.4.4 is already been passed. 10.4.5 was passed on block. That should bring us to 10.5 Executive Services Reports. 10.5.1 is update and adequacy for the 2025 state and federal government elections. Are there any councillors or is there a councillor who's happy to move one of the options?
If I may ask a question.
Certainly, Councillor Duggan.
So the Point 4 that was just passed at part of the last motion that was passed. The request the Chief Executive Officer include the funding of outstanding facilities upgrades to the Byford and Jarrahdale fire stations and any other later identified facilities upgrades to any other of the Shire's fire stations as priorities to the 2025 state and federal government elections. Should that raise a mention, since that's been passed, should that raise a mention in this motion also?
Thank you for the question, Mr. CEO. Are you happy to provide a response?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that the resolution that council made previously would be captured in future updates of this. So I'm not sure necessarily what adding any more with that to this would do. You know, repeating council's already made the decision. We would certainly then include that in advocacy documentation moving forward. This is not asking. This is mainly asking council about the prioritisation of roads and noting the progress that has been made on those existing priorities, and about whether the council's happy for the Shire President myself to go to Canberra again, not necessarily adding or taking away priorities at this stage. So I think that would be consolidated later on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Is there a councillor who's happy to move one of the options? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Which option are you moving?
My apologies, officer's recommendation. Thanks.
So that's option 1. Is there a councillor who's happy to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Is anyone opposed? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate, please?
This is a discussion that's been had over months, in particular the hypergrowth roads and the priorities with those. So I'm happy to leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Bishop, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bias, you'd like to speak against?
Thank you, Shire President. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I strongly object to this motion, and I'll list the reasons why. Firstly, I feel the report conflates two distinct items that should have been considered separately: the advocacy actions update and the travel to Canberra. By combining these two issues into one report, it creates unnecessary confusion and makes it difficult for us to address each matter on its own merit. In my opinion, the advocacy actions and travel plans require separate consideration and deliberation to ensure clarity, both for debate but also for proper decision making. That said, this is the report that we have, so I'll do my best to address both separately. Addressing the concerns with the road priorities, I have significant concerns regarding some of the road priorities outlined in the report. As noted in the deputation that we heard earlier this evening, advocating for funding that has already been made a condition in a development approval is redundant. We need to ensure that our advocacy efforts are focused on securing new and necessary funding rather than revisiting issues that should already have been resolved through existing approvals. This represents an inefficient use of our advocacy resources. Now, it may be that through a SAT process, that condition is not supported and upheld. However, we can only act on what we know at the time, and at this point in time, that funding is addressed through that DA. Further, I personally consider it poor governance for council to approve travel in the absence of a clear travel policy. While we made that exception last year to ensure that the President and CEO could attend important meetings in Canberra at that short notice, this should not become a recurring practice. Approving travel without a guiding policy sets a dangerous precedent and lacks the necessary framework for accountability and consistency in decision making. Now, numerous local governments have good travel policies that are readily available. A brief search online, quick Google search found many examples that we could very quickly adapt to suit our needs. There is no reason to delay developing our own travel policy until some vague future meeting. It is my view that we should have this policy in place before making any further travel commitments. In the absence of a travel policy, we are ill prepared to handle the very likely scenario of a federal election being called before November. Point 4 of the motion states, approves the Shire President and Chief Executive Officer attend the upcoming National Growth Areas Alliance event in Canberra in November to launch the election priorities in accordance with Council's travel policy to be developed. This could result in a situation where we are approving travel plans for an event that may become irrelevant following from an advocacy standpoint if the election has already taken place, or worse, the government is in caretaker mode. This lacks the foresight and planning that could frankly be embarrassing and an avoidable situation for council. In conclusion, my view is that this report confuses and conflates two separate issues that should have been presented independently and given independent due consideration. Approving travel in particular without an established policy, given that we have time to get that policy in place, to me demonstrates a poor governance outcome, and for this reason I cannot support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Does anyone like to speak for the motion? I'll speak for the motion. The comment I would make, and I'm trying to use the right analogy, whether it's a horse and carriage or love and marriage. Advocacy and travelling to Canberra go together, as I say, like love and marriage and a horse and carriage. The reason I say that is because we need to get face time with the politicians. And the reality is that if you're looking at a federal election, that's where the federal politicians are, in Canberra. We will still engage with the Honourable Andrew Hastie and whoever the government puts up against him. Of course, that is goes without saying. We'll also advocate with senators, as the CEO and I already have done. But I think, as I said, it goes together. I'm actually a little bit embarrassed. I'm really embarrassed that as a member agency of National Growth Area Alliance, we have been asked, encouraged, almost, I wouldn't say forced, but certainly we've been encouraged to travel to Canberra this month. Both the CEO and I looked at each other and said, we should be going, but how do we justify it? We don't want to spend ratepayers' money on a trip to Canberra. And I don't know whether we made the right decision, but we decided not to go. We decided to go all in for the National Growth Area Alliance, which we're a member of, in November. I would suspect, and I know suspicion is not a good thing in debate, it should be beyond reasonable doubt, but I suspect, knowing the National Growth Area Alliance, if there is any inclination that the federal election will be called prior to November, the National Growth Area Alliance will be agile, they will react, and the National Growth Area Alliance will have a advocacy event, and that probably should be in the report here. It's actually National Growth Areas Alliance advocacy event. That's what it's all about. It's not to go and sit down and talk about random stuff. It's actually advocacy, and we spend good money to be part of the National Growth Area Alliance, and that is to get in the room with the politicians, with ministers, with the government, and with their relevant opposition members. It is a way for us to advocate stronger in numbers. I hope that us not going this month won't cause us any negativity in terms of advocacy, but I'm sure that we can overcome that. So quite simply, whilst I acknowledge there's some concerns that there's two separate parts of this motion, being advocacy and travel, I would say that they go together like a hand in glove. You cannot advocate unless you've got face time with the politicians. The advocacy that the CEO and I did at the end of last year was significant. The advocacy that we have done locally has been outstanding. The fact that we've got the Deputy Premier committing to come to an event for a breakfast is outstanding. It shows we are advocating. It shows that we are serious in what we're doing. So quite simply, I commend this motion. And in terms of the hyper road growth priorities, there is some science behind that. The CEO and the Director of Community Engagement and his team have put together a map which all councillors can see, and I'm sure all councillors are able to view at any time. Those 9 roads aren't plucked. Those 9 roads, there is sense in the advocacy. There is road crash data. And in actual fact, the reason those maps now exist with that road crash data is feedback from the CEO and I travelling to Canberra to speak to members of the government and members of opposition. They told us what they wanted to see on maps. They told us what we need to do in advocacy. They told us not to have a shopping list. they told us to have 4 projects that are relevant, that are effective and can be delivered. Because as people at this table will know, politicians want to get votes. They want to do the right thing to get votes in areas that they think they can win the seat. We have done a great job, and this part here, travelling to Canberra, to go front and centre as part of the National Growth Area Alliance, to get front and centre, to meet politicians, we need to do it, quite simply as that. In relation to the travel plan or the travel policy, yes, maybe we should have had a travel policy. This motion here, as moved and has been seconded, is now live, talks about council's travel policy to be developed prior to November. I would imagine, and again, imagining is a bit like suspicion, probably not an unequivocal position, but if the National Growth Area Alliance has an event prior to November, if there's an early election, then that travel policy will obviously be developed to allow the CEO and myself to travel to Canberra. I commend this motion. Is there anyone against it?
Not against it, Mr. President, but I was just wondering if I may ask a question, please.
Certainly, Councillor Duggan.
Thank you, Mr. President. To Councillor Bias, I noticed that you're against the motion. Is there any amendments to the motion that you would see would be of benefit that you would like to put forward? Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bias. Are you happy to provide a response?
I'm happy to provide a response. That's why I opened my debate by saying that I feel that two separate aspects have been conflated. So there's no way that I can amend this so that we can unpick the two. I would have much preferred to see an update and a travel policy, to be honest. But like I said, we've got the report that we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor, where are we up to? Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close debate?
I'm happy to go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion is passed 5-2. So that brings us to agenda item 10.5.2, which has been moved on block. That brings us to agenda item 10.6, which is confidential reports, which there are nil. Agenda item number 11 is urgent business, which there is nil. Agenda item 12 is elected member questions, of which notice has been given, which there is nil. Agenda item number 13 is closure. I declare the ordinary council meeting of 15th, I was going to say 15th of April, that's not right. The 20th of May 2024 closed at 9:52 p.m. Thank you, members of the public. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, staff.